This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Ahead of us on this Wednesday's program, we start with Chris Thurston. He's the state coordinator for the Kansas Farm Service Agency, and he's joining us to share insight on the FSA's offerings for veterans. We're also joined by Jeanne Falk Jones, K-State multi-county agronomist, and she previews the upcoming 2022 Crop Pest Management Schools. Also ahead, K-State Agricultural Policy Specialist Jenny Ifft provides information on Pasture, Rainfall, and Forage Insurance, including how the product works, payments that producers have received in the last year, and upcoming sign-up deadlines. We end with this week's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts, where K-State experts Brad White, Dustin Pendell, and Bob Larson answer a cow-calf producer's question on knowing when is the best time to wean calves. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now for our Kansas FSA segment, and this week we have joining us Chris Thurston. He is the State Outreach Coordinator with the Kansas FSA. So, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, today we're going to talk through some of the veterans offerings through the FSA. So, we have Veterans Day quickly approaching, so this is a timely subject to be talking through.
Yes, ma'am.
So, when it comes to veterans and the FSA, how does that kind of work?
So USDA offers different incentives when it comes to their programs for veterans, farmers, and ranchers. So before we get into that, I'd like to kind of discuss what the definition of a veteran is and how those benefits kind of can apply. So for FSA program purposes, veteran farmer or rancher is a person who has served in the armed forces, has not operated a farm or a ranch for more than 10 years total, and has obtained status as a veteran during the most recent 10-year period.
Awesome. So now that we have kind of the outline of what classifies as a veteran with the FSA programs, what are some of the programs that they can partake in? Because it's really all programs available through the FSA, just some added benefit, right?
That is correct. So for entities such as corporations, LLCs, general partnerships, requesting to be considered a veteran or farmer rancher, at least 50% of the interest holdings must be held by veterans, farmers, and ranchers. So let's get into how the veterans can capture their benefits under specific programs. For example, our ELAP program, our Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, veterans receive a 90% payment factor, meaning that for every $1 earned, they receive 90 cents, whereas the public receives a 60% payment factor. For our NAP programs, our Non-Insured Assistance Program, we will waive the service fees for the cost for veteran farmers or ranchers for basic NAP crop coverage, and if that producer chooses to buy coverage, the premium cost is therefore cut in half. And for our ARC PLC, our Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage Program, veteran farmers are eligible for benefits on farms having 10 acres or less, whereas in general these farms are not eligible for that benefit at all. Our Conservation Reserve Program, it's our CRP Transition Incentive Program TIP. The veteran farmers and ranchers with the approved CRP TIP contracts are not required to meet the 12-month owner-operator criteria when enrolling in the continuous CRP signups. $50 million was authorized for voluntary transition of land enrollment this year under the expiring CRP1 contract for owner-operators to veterans, beginning, or socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to return land production for sustainable grazing and crop production. Our grassland CRP, veteran farmers and ranchers in these areas are used for evaluating offers for ranking. So if at least 50% of the producers on an offer is a veteran farmer or rancher, then that offer will gain an additional 10 points for rankings.
Awesome. So some great benefits in terms of what's offered through the FSA for veterans specifically. And there's some additional programs as well, right?
That's correct. So our additional programs, dairy margin program coverage, our DMC. Veterans, farmers, and ranchers may qualify for waiver of the annual administrative fee for lock-in coverage elections for the dairy operations. And our limited resources, beginning farmer or socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher administration fee is a limited resource for beginning farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers. They may be exempt from that administration fee as well. So the administration fee must accompany the contract application for coverage. Dairy operation requesting the exemption must complete the CCC 860 and have that form on file at the applicable county office by the end of the annual enrollment period.
We just talked through a lot, right, Chris? There's a lot that we just covered. So if listeners are tuning in and they're thinking, I'd rather see this all on paper or maybe listed out online somewhere, where can people find more information on it?
So they can reach out to their local county service center, the FSA Service Center, and our great staff there will be able to assist them.
Absolutely. And then I know you wanted to talk a little bit about mental health and give a bit of a PSA on that. And we talk about, those that struggle with mental health, and farmers themselves obviously are a big part of that, but also veterans as well. It's, so when you have a veteran farmer, it's almost like a double whammy of a situation.
Absolutely. So as a combat veteran myself, I can tell you how important it is to maintain good mental health. We know that in the middle of a drought, the normal pressure of farming can be really tough to handle. We also know that agriculture has a disappropriate number of suicides every year. So please, if you're struggling, call your family doctor, your community mental health center, or even the new 988 suicide prevention hotline. And just remember, you're not alone, and your struggles don't mean that you're a bad producer. So all farmers and ranchers, they're important to us here at the Farm Service Agency, and we want to make sure that you're well and productive for our country as well as for your family.
Absolutely. Yeah. Key part of not only, like you said, the well-being of our country in terms of feeding everyone, but also part of their own communities as well and in their own families. So a great reminder for sure in terms of mental health and making sure you're staying healthy in that regards.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for your time today and for everyone's work that you guys do at the Kansas Farm Service Agency. I'm sure listeners would echo the same.
Well, thank you, ma'am. We appreciate you having us.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Chris Thurston. He is the State Outreach Coordinator for the Kansas FSA, joining us for some veterans PSAs and some offerings through the Kansas Farm Service Agency. Before we cut to a short break, we are joined now by Jeanne Falk Jones. She is a K-State multi-county agronomist based on the Northwest K-State Research and Experiment Stations out of Colby. So, Jeanne, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Today, we're previewing an event that's coming up. Well, several events really, but it's the upcoming 2022 Crop Pest Management Schools. So tell us a bit about these schools.
So these schools are focused really for any farmer or applicator who is making the decisions or is doing the applications for any type of pest that we have in the field. So that would include weeds, diseases, and insects. And so our topics for these schools are really going to kind of encompass all of those types of pests and what we can do to get them under control.
Wonderful. Well, a timely event for sure. And when and where will these events be held this year, Jeanne?
So we have 2 crop pest management schools happening in northwest and north central Kansas. The first one is on November 30th. That is being held at Beloit, the First United Methodist Church. And then the second school is on December 1st. That is happening at Grainfield at St. Agnes Catholic Church Center. And so both of these are day-long schools. So they'll run from about 8 to 5 each day, and then we'll have multiple topics happening throughout the day.
Absolutely. And I know that this is a great opportunity for those that are commercial applicators to potentially receive credits, right?
That's exactly right. And so our schedule for the school is actually built around the requirements for folks who need to renew their 1A commercial applicator's license. And so around that, we have 7 credits and the core hour that will fulfill the requirements for anyone who has that commercial applicator's license in the 1A or the agriculture pest category. So we also have certified crop advisor credits, and we'll have 8 pest management credits that go for the CCA folks. And so we try to offer those because we know that our clientele need them, but then there's just a lot of information that we're going to have that just a farmer would like to hear too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a great opportunity for many groups. And I know for those commercial applicators, this might be one of the last opportunities for the year for them to get them in.
I haven't completely looked at the schedule, but I would guess we are, if not the last, one of the very last ones. So yes, good opportunity to finish up any requirements that you have for your license that's expiring this year.
Absolutely. So if you're a procrastinator like me, no judgment here. Great opportunity for you to check out. In terms of what will be taught, Jeanne, I know that this year there's some unique offerings.
That's exactly right. So typically we try to kind of split up our schedule a little bit between weeds and diseases and insects. But this year we are pretty heavily weighted on the weed control topic. And one of our special guests that we have is Dr. Michael Walsh. And he is actually the Director of Weed Research at the University of Sydney, and that is Sydney, Australia. And so he is going to come and talk about how they're combating herbicide-resistant weeds in Australia and maybe some of that technology that might be applied for our area here, because since we're also struggling with so many herbicide-resistant weeds.
Sure, yeah, a cool opportunity, a unique one that I'm sure you can't get anywhere else, obviously, but awesome opportunity to hear from Dr. Walsh for sure. And then people are tuning in and they're thinking, well, I think I want to register for this event. How can they go about doing that?
Yes, we have a website set up that you can go get all the information about the school and go ahead and register and pay to attend the school. And that website is northwest www.ksu.edu/events. And that is the kind of the general event page for our Northwest area page, and then just click on Crop Pest Management Schools, and you'll find all this information, and go ahead and register and pay to go ahead and attend.
Absolutely, yeah. And Jeanne, is there a cutoff date for registration?
We would love for people to be registered by November 22nd, and if you do that, then the cost is $50 to attend. Now, if your schedule changes and you find out that you can attend after November 22nd, you can still register, but the cost goes up to $75.
Sure, so some incentive there to get people registered ahead of time, but no worries if not. Awesome, Jeanne. Well, thank you so much for sharing this event with us. And if listeners are tuning in and they're on the fence about maybe attending, what might be a word of advice to give them their last push that they should?
Well, I really appreciate this program because we really kind of go through and handpick the topics that we think are going to be the most important to our producers in Northwest Kansas and North Central Kansas. And so we're very focused on weed control because that's what we've heard that everybody is struggling with quite a lot, and especially in these really dry conditions. And so we have a couple of talks that's really going to kind of delve into that. So how do we get the most success for our herbicide applications? And so, the fact that this schedule is tailored so much for our area, I think makes it very inviting.
Well, Jeanne, I can't thank you enough for joining me and having this conversation with me and for listeners to hear about it over the air, but thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Jeanne Falk Jones. She is the K-State multi-county agronomist based out of the Northwest Kansas Research and Extension Center out of Colby, joining us to share information about the upcoming 2022 Crop Pest Management Schools. The link, as always, to register and for more information on this event will be found on agtoday.net in the show notes of our program today. So if you're interested, be sure to check that out. With that being said, we will be back with more ahead shortly on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by K-State Extension Agricultural Policy Specialist, Jeanne Ifft. So, Jeanne, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. So, Jeanne, today we're going to be talking through Pasture, Rainfall, and Forage Insurance, otherwise known as PRF. So let's start with what exactly is that insurance?
So we could also say forage insurance. It's a insurance product where if you have land that's used for hay or for grazing, you can get payments when it's drier than usual in your area. So like other products that are a part of the federal crop insurance program, this is a public-private partnership. What that means is that the public is sharing the risk with producers. The federal government pays a part of the premium. So that's called the premium subsidy. Federal government is sharing in the cost. Because of that, because of the way this program is designed, producers on average do tend to come out ahead in the long run. So the typical experience is that producers are getting paid more in indemnities than they put in premiums. Again, on average, this isn't everybody's experience. This is still about risk management. But if you look at all of Kansas for 2011 to 2021, producers put in nearly $49 million of their own money into this product. So, that's an investment producers made into risk management. During the same period, it paid out nearly $73 million. So that does sort of reflect the program is designed so that the producer comes out ahead.
Absolutely. Key to know for sure in terms of how this works and how it actually benefits producers. Useful, timely tool, potentially.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So things to discuss with an agent when it comes to this insurance. I know there's three things that are really key here.
Right. And PRF, or forage insurance, it's a relatively simple insurance product, but if it's the first time you're using it, there's going to be a lot of new details, new terminology. So it may take a year or two to become familiar with it. But again, there's a couple questions you want to go through with an agent and spend some time on. The first is how much protection you want. So you can decide how much of your hay or grazing land that you want to protect. What's the coverage level? So higher coverage levels, they're going to pay out more often. So you're only going to have a small shortfall in precipitation or rainfall to get a payment. Lower coverage levels pay out less often. Producer has to put in more money to get a higher coverage level. So there's a trade-off there.
Absolutely. And I know the next one is kind of what time of the year do you want this coverage? Because you can kind of be selective about that.
Right. Producers get to pick when in the year they want to have protection. So you have to select at least 2 2-month intervals.
Okay.
So you could pick April and May, June and July. You could pick January and February. But you have to pick when during the year you want that protection.
So knowing kind of your average yearly rainfall might be of benefit for this.
So I think that the main things in terms of that decision that producers are going to want to look at that is when their forage yields have the most risk from low precipitation. They're also going to want to look at historic rainfalls during particular times of year in their grid or in their area.
Absolutely. That way you can make kind of the most of this for sure.
Right.
Sure. And then that third part is just maybe understanding that this is an area insurance. It's a little bit different.
Right. So I've been using the term grid. A grid is about 12 by 15, 12 by 17 miles. So they're smaller than a county. In Riley County, we have 6 grids. Not all the grids are exactly within a county, but the precipitation is going to be measured in the grid. So, sometimes we say rainfall insurance. Technically, it's precipitation, so snowfall levels as well. But precipitation is going to be measured within that grid, within the 2-month intervals. And that's what your payments are going to be based upon. So if there's widespread drought, then, you're much more likely to get payments. But sometimes, as we know, rainfall can be spotty or snow can be spotty. So there is a chance that you might have a shortfall in your fields, but not in the grid. And it could work the other way as well. You may be the lucky one that gets the rain, but the rest of your grid doesn't. So you might get a payout when you don't necessarily need it. Again, that doesn't always happen, but it's something important to be aware of because it can happen, and see if you're comfortable with that for your operation.
Yeah, talking those 3 things through with an agent, kind of key to understanding this insurance and how it works for sure. And I know that this insurance, like we mentioned, it's timely, obviously. We've seen a lot of drought this year. Does it actually help protect against drought like it implies?
Right. So you think, rainfall and drought, they're very related, obviously, but they're not exactly the same thing. Whether you get precipitation in a certain time of year does matter. So to answer this question, I looked at PRF payouts for 2022. 2022 is not complete yet, but we have 2/3 of the state in extreme or exceptional drought at the highest drought level. So I wanted to see, has it been paying out more in areas that have higher levels of drought?
And the results were hopeful?
Yeah, no, it seems to be working. On average, it's working as intended. So what I looked at was net indemnity. So what are the payouts minus the premiums that producers put in? And for the 43 counties in exceptional drought, they'd averaged $3 in net indemnities or net payouts to date. So on average, those counties were $3 ahead for this year.
We have some counties that haven't quite reached drought conditions, but they're still quite dry.
Not very many.
Yeah.
So that's sort of abnormally dry category. There's still 7 counties as of last week in that category, and they hadn't been paid out as many indemnities. So they had still, at this point, on average, they'd paid more in premium than they had received in indemnities.
Sure. So maybe the more extreme drought conditions you've had, the better payout, obviously.
Yeah, because of that connection with rainfall.
And in terms of its use, this insurance use, how many people actually sign up for this insurance usually?
So in 2022, we had nearly 3 million acres in Kansas. It's been growing. There's a lot of producers that found that it works for their operation. It is still a relatively small share of pasture land in Kansas, about 15, 16 million acres.
So, Jenny, let's say for those that enrolled this year, what have payments sort of looked like for the 2022 producers that enrolled in this insurance this past year?
So in 2022, Kansas producers paid almost $14 million in premiums for PRF. To date, it's paid out over $20 million in indemnities. And I do, again, given the drought we're experiencing, given the widespread precipitation shortfall, I do expect that number to become much larger. But already, the beginning of November, it's paid out a lot more than producers have paid in.
Sure, and that you take that year comparison just this year compared to, what was it, a decade almost period that you discussed earlier?
Yeah.
So comparison-wise, it seems to be working the way it should.
Yeah, no, it definitely is paying out over time, especially when there's widespread drought.
Excellent. So when it comes to signing up, is this something that you would encourage for producers to continue with?
If somebody is interested, they need to contact a local insurance agent pretty quickly. The deadline is December 1st, so that's when you have to be signed up. That's for the 2023 calendar year. However, the premiums won't be billed until September of 2023.
Okay, key to know for sure that deadline, December 1st. Yep. So signing up, you need to be prepared to answer what two-month categories you want to select for the entire year.
There's some decisions that you have to make within this time period.
Can you add more than just those two-month periods?
You could cover the entire year. Some people will do that. You could cover the summer. You could cover the winter. There's a lot of different trade-offs with when you use the coverage that you can discuss with an agent.
Excellent. Yeah, so customizable for sure. And Jenny, I know that you've put together an article that's going to go up on Beef Tips, and it's also going to be shared on Ag Manager. Where can producers, if they're looking for more information, can they expect to find it?
So yeah, if you're a subscriber to the Beef Tips newsletter or the Ag Manager newsletter, they'll be going out on both of those this week, and they'll be posted to those websites. On those articles, there's resources from the Risk Management Agency, other resources we have on Ag Manager as well.
Well, Jenny, I can't thank you enough for your time today and for the insight that you always provide, especially when it comes to important topics like insurance. So beneficial for producers to learn through the air.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Once again, that was K-State Extension Agricultural Policy Specialist Jeanne Ifft on Pasture, Rainfall, and Forage Insurance, otherwise known as PRF, or as just Forage Insurance. All of the information that we discussed today, including where you can find it on agmanager.info, will be linked in the show notes of today's program, which can be found on agtoday.net. So if you're looking for a clickable link to get to Ag Manager, you can find that there on agtoday.net. We're about to cut to a short break, but still to come, we are going to be hearing from our friends at the Beef Cattle Institute for this week's BCI's Ask the Experts segment. This week, K-State experts Brad White, Dustin Pendell, and Bob Larson answer a listener's question on when is the best time to wean calves. As always, though, this fun group makes things a bit more interesting by making the discussion a competition to see who can supply the listener with the best answer. So this week, Dustin Pendell with his expert insight on the area of economics and Bob Larson with his expert insight on food animal production medicine compete head-to-head to see who can supply this cow-calf operator with the best answer to their question. Also, if you feel as though our weekly segment with these experts isn't enough, be sure to tune into their very own podcast, BCI's Cattle Chat. On Cattle Chat, these experts bring in other beef cattle professionals to discuss hot-button issues in beef production and share even more of their expert advice and insight for listeners to learn from. New episodes from them go live once a week, every Friday actually. So again, be sure to check out the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast if you're looking for more from them. But for now, you're not going to want to miss hearing from this fun team on our show, so be sure to stay tuned for that and more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We're ending today's programming with our Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts segment. This week, our K-State experts are Brad White, Dustin Pendell, and Bob Larson.
Hi, welcome to Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. I'm Brad White, and with me today is Dr. Dustin Pendell. Hey, Brad. And Dr. Bob Larson.
Hey, Brad.
Happy to have these guys here because they'll have a chance to answer some of the questions that you've sent in. If you have a question for us, you can always send us an email at bci@ksu.edu. I'll ask you guys the listener question, and based on your answers, you'll be awarded up to 10 points as we go through. So let's jump in with today's question, which is from a listener on a commercial cow-calf operation that says, when is the best time to wean my calves? Dustin, I'll let you go first.
Well, as the economist, the answer is it depends.
Thought you'd say that.
Yep, there's 10 points right there. No, I think there's a lot of factors that probably go into it. You know, right now we're, depending on where you live, you have drought, so, you know, the weather probably will play a role into this. Wean maybe your calves off early, maybe that then has an impact on the cows. So obviously weather, of course, as an economist, prices, marketing aspect of it, that's probably also going to have a big role into that. Other things you need to think about is labor. I mean, do you have the available labor to allow you to wean at a certain time? And so those are just a couple things I think that would keep in mind.
Excellent. I think good answers there, Dustin. And it does depend. And several of those factors will change year to year. So not a set time. So 7 points for Dustin. Bob, what are your thoughts?
Well, I do think that prices and kind of watching the seasonal patterns of prices is really important, but that's pretty much outside my area of expertise, so I'll defer to Dustin on that. But I am interested in the grazing conditions. So Dustin mentioned drought, the availability of forage both for the cows and for calves post-weaning, if I can keep them on my operation a little bit longer. So my bias is actually towards weaning calves maybe a little bit earlier than is oftentimes typical. If we're typically going to wean at 7 months of age, I think it's fine to push that up a little bit if I can get some extra body condition on the cows going into the winter. If I have a relatively inexpensive feed stuff to put those calves on so that I can actually increase their plane of nutrition over what they're getting late in the grazing season so that I can get some better gain on some calves. But a lot of that comes down to my base forage for the cows, and possibly some regrowth or cool season grasses or something like that. Put calves on so that they can grow even better post-weaning than they did pre-weaning. And the other thing I'm going to say is being flexible, because every year is a little bit different.
Excellent answer. A little bit over time, so we're going to have to deduct points on that. And I've got to give you a follow-up question. I've got different follow-up questions for each of you, so we'll have to go through those. You would have had 8 points. You ended up with 6. Are you telling me at 7 months versus 8 months, weaning those calves, it's going to make that much difference in the cow's body condition? Is she really lactating that much at that point that it's going to change it?
No, she's not lactating much right now, but it does a couple of things by removing those calves. By this time, the calf weighs half as much as the cow does. So for every 2 or 3 calves that I'm taking off of that pasture, that takes away that grazing pressure. And a lot of times, of course, we're getting closer to the dormant season for the forages, so there's just more grass available for the cows. And yes, she is still lactating a little bit. Some of them are. So it's just a little bit easier to get some body condition back on those cows, preserve some forage for them. My point is, a young growing calf would really benefit from some nutrient-dense diet. So whether that's green growing forage like a cool season grass or something like that, or it's a supplement, I actually want to get that calf on a better plane of nutrition and give the cow a little bit more forage to go into the winter.
Brings you up to 8 points, but don't have a lot of time, Dustin, for you to answer this follow-up. But we talked a little bit about time of year. Is there a better time of year to wean calves than others relative to prices?
Well, right now it's kind of an odd time with the drought, and prices are already, with the herd liquidation that we're seeing, and we're still seeing it. I assume that it's going to be slowing down soon, but right now prices are really high. If you take a look at the futures markets out through next May, pretty optimistic. Prices are really high. So I know that's not probably the exact answer you want, but right now is a little unique time in that sense. Prices are really high, and it looks like they could stay high, through maybe mid next year. And so you've got those prices. You know what those break-evens are. Don't be afraid to act. The prices are right for your particular situation.
Bob finished with 8. Dustin with 7. Thanks for joining us on BCI Ask the Experts. If you have any questions, comments, things you'd like us to talk about on a future show, you can email us at bci@ksu.edu.
Once again, those were K-State experts Brad White, Dustin Pendell, and Bob Larson for this week's BCI's Ask the Experts. That concludes today's programming. We'll be back with more tomorrow on Agriculture Today.